Welcome to Instincts. My name is Marty Strong, and today my guest is Brandon White. How you doing, Brandon?
Good, Marty. Thanks for having me.
We have been hosting guests a few times, but I've always been on the guest side. So I'm going to grill you the way you grilled me.
I look forward to it.
But first, I want to let everybody know a little bit about your background. Brandon's a serial entrepreneur with 2 exits so far. He's still swinging. Lots of strikeouts. I'd like to hear about that because I focus on that a lot myself. You learn a lot from strikeouts. An angel investor, former venture capitalist who at one time worked in marketing at America Online. There's a blast from the past. Successful podcast host and Amazon best-selling author of On Back of the Napkin Business Plan in 11 Slides. You are also a fishing enthusiast and a committed road bicycle athlete. And my business partner, Pete Gary, when you wrote that book and you sent it to me, I think it was before it even got published. I don't know if you remember. I sent you the picture. It had the wine glass. He read it in one sitting, and he's also a serial entrepreneur, and he thought that was an amazing way to describe the basics of putting a business plan down.
I remember that. I'm grateful for that. Yeah. And I didn't realize at the time that it was your current partner, obviously. But
yeah.
I tried to make it as simple as possible.
And I think as complex a life as he's had in business, the clarity, simplicity sometimes makes, people think that means that it's been dumbed down or something. But that's what he liked about it. It just cut through all the BS. And you're kind of that way anyway. I mean, the way you've led your life, the way you've made decisions, and you've been extremely productive and effective, and yet you're still kind of this laid-back guy who was not born in the 60s, but has, like I said earlier, off camera, kind of a 60s vibe about him. So Instincts is about instinctive decisions during life, gut checks, things that you may or may not be able to attribute to a particular moment of learning in the past or mentoring or coaching from somebody. But we like to start with early life, ask our guests if they have anybody that helped them make decisions about where they were going in life, help forge their kind of value systems. The last couple of guests that I've interviewed had very, very strong parental guidance, huge foundation there. And unfortunately, most of my other guests didn't have as solid, support from their parents, so the influences came from other places. So let's start there, and then we'll wander forth.
Got it. Well, one of my most recent business partners, who's a little bit older than me, said to me, he said, one of the things that struck me from the day I met you is you always have this moral compass, and it was very clear to me, he's saying this to me, that you knew what that was and that you followed it without ever questioning it. And I think that is absolutely true. And one time at lunch when we had first met and he made me an offer to be a partner in this firm, he said, well, where did you get that from? And it really made me think. And I think if I go back to it, it probably was my mom. I grew up as a single. Yeah, my mom was a single parent, and my dad was around, but he obviously didn't live with us, and we saw him once a week. So, you get once a week influence. But my mom's influence, probably from those early years, without me clearly understanding what was happening, right, until later in life when you can reflect back. But I think one of the lessons was, and it really solidified my environmental feelings, and maybe just a feeling about what sometimes the most economical, advantageous route is always not necessarily the route that you take just because you can make money. And my mom, we had a farm, and that my parents got divorced, and long and short of it, it was a beautiful farm, and she wanted it to go into conservation easement so it couldn't be developed. My father wanted to develop it, and many people later in life now have said to me, like, if your mom had developed that farm, you would have had a trust fund that you would have never worried about. Long and short of it, we didn't have a trust fund because my mom got somebody to buy it and put it in conservation easement, and that farm still exists to this day in that same format. And I think for me at the time, maybe that just came and went, but looking back, when someone asks you what that influence was, that was just part of our life and our how my mom raised us. So in many ways, that just was influential and probably obviously shaped my quote unquote moral compass. And I think that just led through, and I was really lucky in life in my first company to get a few mentors. Luckily, one was an investor, was on my board. Another was actually didn't invest anything, and he was a client. And these guys really taught me not about business, but also just not by saying, "Hey, that's not right, Brandon," but by just observing their lives and the decisions from the lessons that I learned, that that's how you do things. And I think for me at that point, it wasn't some new revelation. I had gone to really good schools where those principles of what I learned at home were mirrored at school. So I think those things just are ultimately what shaped me.
So you went to college. Did you study something that you ended up using later on, or?
I did.
How'd that
So
work out?
I went to college, and I got my undergraduate in psychology. And I did that mainly because I love psychology. I had worked with a sports psychologist during high school. I had 2 ACL reconstructions playing lacrosse, I'm a Maryland kid. And I was lucky enough that my mom's, one of her good friends from high school, she graduated in 65. They all super good friends, and her husband was one of the leading psychologists at the time. He had been coaching Olympic athletes, gold medal winners and whatnot, and she had asked him if he would work with me, and he did. And I met with him probably in the beginning 2 or 3 times a week. And I just loved psychology because he really taught me what your mind can do. And that just fascinated me, in addition to the fact that I think psychology, I have a master's in psychology and I do have an MBA. At the end of the day, everything we do in life is with people, and everything with people is related to psychology. And if you can understand the dynamics, and most importantly, I would say, Marty, understand yourself. I think people focus on understanding circumstances and situations and what you can do. But if you don't have a good grip on your own self, who you are, where you stand, where your blind spots are, it's really hard to sort of move forward from there. So in many ways, I probably did it in some ways just to be able to coach myself and teach myself and probably save myself some money. And then in the end, when I got my first master's degree, it was really an insurance policy. I started my first company while I was working on my master's, but my thought process, and probably my mom pushing me in that direction as well, was, worst case scenario, you can become a psychologist and you're good at talking to people and you help people with their problems and you can charge for that, and there's always a market for that. So that's sort of how that came out. I really thought I would be a lawyer, to be honest with you, but I did terrible on the LSATs. And I think the universe works in mysterious ways, and it worked out. I'm not saying I wouldn't have enjoyed law. I was I was a National Honor Society student, but I have dyslexia, and I can't take a standardized test if you paid me. So, I can take it, but I don't do well at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately how it all worked out. But psychology is just one of those things that you just use everywhere all the time. So in the end, it did work out.
The point you were making about knowing yourself first, it's hard to have perspective if you don't have an anchor point to measure from, right? So if you're floating all over the place, your perspective is not aligned with anything. It's just kind of changing constantly. But once you know what like your value system is, you know what's right and wrong and these things, everything else starts to bang up against that, and it gets ranked and rated and measured, and you start to see it. You start to see the world with clarity. My big thing is human nature. It is psychology, right? It's behavior. It's expressed psychology. It's acted out. And I used to read everything I could get my hands on as a kid. I mean, I still read about 60-something books a year, and lots of biographies and about books about things that I don't know anything about at all, and just to challenge me, but also just I've seen so much and read so much, and you know, I want to go into another lane. But I think what it did, by the time I was about 30, I gained this appreciation of what human beings do in most situations. That when those situations are repeated throughout history, and it's not statistical analysis, it's not scientific, it's not a scientific process. It's just that most likely when a human being is confronted with an alligator at 4 feet, they're going to act a certain way. Most often when a human being is starving to death, they are going to act a certain way. And I really saw it play out with Katrina. You know, there's this social science kind of construct that the whole world is getting more evolved and everybody's getting more evolved and people are more evolved, and they'll never act like animals, they'll never act like our ancestors did to survive. And you know, the contra argument to that is, now we're basically still animals, and we live in a comfortable environment, we have a lot of our safety and security taken care of, and so we are able, you know, the old Maslow hierarchy thing, we are able to do this because it's a luxury. We're not down at the base of that pyramid trying to find food, water, and shelter. And you know, you hear all that and you don't really think much of it. And then an event like Katrina happens. And now I was involved through Blackwater with, we went down and helped, and we actually had about 750 people down there in helicopters and everything. And it took about 72 hours before the first barbaric acts of human behavior started to bubble up. Because the people that were in the middle of all of it, after they didn't see cops and EMT and people show up like within hours, or if not minutes, they gave up on the social structure that they'd followed, this, you know, civilization, so to speak, and started taking things into their own hands. And the longer that stretched out, you know, the worse it got. And so, I mean, even in that stadium where they were keeping people, the same kind of timeline started happening. And you found, you know, it wasn't Dahmer Party yet, but it was getting to this weird Lord of the Flies Dahmer Party moment. And I said, you know what? And I think it happened in Haiti too when the earthquake happened. There was some documented stuff. Everybody was, that means all social structures are only 72 hours, that, you know, 96 hours away from fracturing it for the purpose of survival. And now, there's a lot of psychology in all that. There's a lot of ways people could go, and value systems are important. If everybody believes in dying before violating, you know, the 10 Commandments and eating their partner because they're starving to death, well, then maybe it won't ever happen. But that's not the mix that you usually have in society. So, yeah, I use human nature all the time to figure out what people are going to do. I use it to predict things. I whether it's military stuff, whatever, I'll just look at it and go, okay, human nature being what it is, if this happens, then that's going to happen. Most likely these people are going to act this way. And yeah, so I'm with you, man. Psychology, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I say things that sometimes people don't like, but are true. And when you really study human psychology and all the things that you've seen, there are examples of it. I tend to say things sometimes, Marty, that people don't like to hear, but I think generally they're true. And one of those things that I say is that humans are predictable animals. And when you've seen the patterns that you've seen and you study psychology long enough, humans are generally very predictable. There are always exceptions to everything out there, period, end of story. But in general, you will see that behavior is pretty predictable, and a lot of people don't have a grip on themselves. And if you don't have a grip on yourself, then you, to your point, you don't have this focus or this thing to lean back on. For me, it's instinctual, and I don't mean instinctual to the sense that like I have got some innate thing. maybe I do, or maybe I don't, or maybe I recognized an innate thing, or maybe I developed it. That's probably a different discussion. But long and short of it is, it's really easy for me in general to navigate life because I have this core focus. And I think this extends into other things. People will always talk about marriage, and they'll say, well, what's the magic formula for a long marriage? And I know you've had history there, and my wife and I have been together for 30 years. I think we've been married for, I can't remember, maybe we've been married for almost 18. But what I always tell people there is that the key to a successful marriage, people will say, oh, it's compromise, Brandon. It's not, yeah, you will compromise. But the fact of the matter is you're going to compromise in any relationship you're in, whether that's with your best friend, your whoever, a colleague, whoever it is. The key is that your relationship is something in existing to your already existing life, which means that you have your own life, you have your own beliefs, and you know who you are, because anything short of that, and listeners probably cringing a little bit, but anything short of that, and you are susceptible to codependence. And you will look to that other person to fulfill things in you that you haven't figured out for yourself, or you'll get mad at it. And it turns into, history there is predictable, or history tells the story of that. So I think all of these things, and by no means am I sitting here saying I've got it all figured out. All I would say is that I've got a good core that my mom and the mentors that I've had around me in life have shaped to give better than whatever, I don't know what the percentage is, but a better than 70% development of that, so that it feels instinctual. I would just say it's automatic because I understand what that operating manual or field manual looks like.
Sure. So how about a little self-analysis, since we're talking about this? I don't know how to describe you other than as an entrepreneur, because I think at least everything you've told me, except for the bike riding and the fishing, always kind of falls into, I tell you what, most people are scared to death of doing, which is, not having a W-2 paycheck, finding somebody else who was an entrepreneur, or going to a company that's been around forever, so that entrepreneur's either dead or sold the company, but there's security and safety. And when you talk to those people and you tell them, if you give them any inkling of what you do naturally, what you've done ever since you got out of college, it's terrifying for them to contemplate them doing it, and they reject it as kind of this, it's a strange kind of fringe behavior. Most people would never do that. Yet we're in a society, we're in a country where, we're not the only ones that are capitalists. I've been in lots of third world countries, and everybody on the street's selling you something, right? So everybody's doing it. But we're in a country where we have so many small businesses and so many new startups, and all the way up to the IPOs and the existing companies, and the creation of new things by companies, which is another kind of an entrepreneurial flex. What was your psychology in doing this, or what kind of psychology lends itself to this kind of, and I'm not going to say comfortable like easy, but being comfortable with this kind of level of risk taking over and over again?
That's a good question, Marty, and I'll use one analogy and then maybe expand on that. But a few years ago, before my mom died, we were having a conversation, about when I had my first ACL. I had my first ACL injury when I was in 7th grade playing lacrosse in Maryland, and back then the surgery was very different than it is today. Or the surgery wasn't, well, the surgery was a little different, but the recovery and treatment was different. I was in a cast for 6 months from my top of my thigh to my ankle the first time. By the third one that I had, I was in a machine and I was walking within 24 hours. So the progress was exorbitant there. But my mom said something to me. We were talking about something, and she said, it always amazed me that you never quit. playing lacrosse. And I can remember, Marty, this conversation as if it was just a minute ago. I was standing upstairs, and I'm in my studio at my house, in my backyard, but I was standing in the kitchen because we get better reception there at our house. And I was looking out the window, and I said to my mom, dead serious, I never knew quitting was an option. And I'm telling you that I didn't know that it was an option. Like, it just wasn't how I was made. It was just not an option. So there was never, like, no one said, like, hey, Brandon, you can quit now. And even if they would have said, I've been like, what? Like, what is that? It just never was an option. So when I've done these startups, these which are extraordinarily hard, but also exciting, I think for me, it's not that I don't know they can fail, because trust me, I've had like 20 failures. I did learn that lesson the hard way, but it's that I inherently believe and am not concerned with if it will be that exact idea or business or another one that follows. And basically, you have to have this belief that you can do what you're not sure you can do. And what that really amounts to is that you are scared to death, but using a word to describe it, you have the courage to move forward. And you believe that even though you don't know what you don't know, you will find out that. And I think what happens to people is that they get scared in that moment of not knowing because it's not secure. And when humans don't feel secure, they go into fight or flight mode. That's not even it's not even something sometimes people can control. I mean, you of all people know that, Marty. You're a Navy SEAL. Like, you're trained that you will probably panic when someone sticks a gun in your face. It's not that you won't, quote unquote, panic. It's that you will be able to recognize that as panic, and then you will be able to deal with that panic in a rational way. And I think I learned those skills from really just growing up with a single mom who just kept going forward. Like, being a single woman in the 70s and starting a career from zero when you didn't work before you got divorced is not a trivial event. So I inherently saw that. And then I inherently saw my mom write 7 books, be a writer for the newspaper, win the Kodak Award, win all these awards, and then subsequently realize that you're never really going to it's hard to make a living that way. And that she went back to school in probably her 40s. She went back to, got into Yale, went to Yale, graduated from Yale, and had an entire career as a dean of students. So if you sort of look at that, what I was watching and growing up with, that sort of shapes you. So for me, and maybe it's innate, and I'm not saying that not in a derogatory way. I don't know that everyone's built to be an entrepreneur, just like not everybody's built to be a Navy SEAL or an SF person or whatever, they're a pilot, right, whatever it is. But I think for me, if I'm doing that self-analysis, it's just that for me, I mean, failure hurts, but I've just never really known that success wasn't an option. And mainly because I didn't grow up with a lot. I grew up with a lot, but not a lot of cash, let's just say. Like, not having enough money was never an option for me, Marty. Like, and not because I want things. You know me. Like, anybody who knows me, I enjoy nice things, but I'm not one of these guys who's going to go collecting all these things and posting on social media because I've got this, that, and the other. I'm just not like that. It was more about security, but I just inherently believe that it had to work out. And when it has to work out, that pressure, positive pressure, seems to work, at least for me.
Yeah. You know,
I don't know how that sounds, but
well, you know, I didn't know I could quit. That line from a little bit earlier, I think I had that maybe when I was in buds because my dad wouldn't let me quit. He wouldn't let me stop. Um, he was a little guy, but he was a kind of a angry, mean guy, and so I had to do things over and over and over until I got it right. It was just kind of and it was just the environment, right? So I've thought about it before because when I went through buds, seals were 100% classified. Nobody knew anything about them. There weren't any movies or books or anything, and I ended up through a mistake of orders showing up there, and they talked me into volunteering. So I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know why I was doing it, and then I didn't know where I was going. Back in my mind, I'm thinking my career in the Navy is going to be carrying logs and boats. This is what these guys do for their 4 years as an enlisted guy. But, looking back on it, I don't think I thought that was an option either. That the quitting and stopping, it wasn't something I'd been allowed to do. It wasn't, and most of my friends had fathers the same way. They were all like, World War II vets and stuff. They didn't let their kids quit, stop anything. But the other kind of comparison, it's more of an analogy, is boxing. And the way you described your mom's life, and although you didn't say it, you said it was painful with all the startups. It's taking a punch, the concept of taking a punch. Boxing looks really brutal and crazy and everything, and if you train somebody to box without ever actually hitting them, they can get the skills, they can get the choreography, they can get the footwork, they can do a lot of things, right? But the first time you're hit, you experience something new and unique. And being able to take a hit and continue to operate you got to do that if you're going to box, or if you're going to do any kind of martial art, really. It doesn't mean you got to take a knockout punch, but most of the punches, if you watch a boxing match, if they got 50 punches in a round, maybe 5 to 7 of them actually really hurt really bad. So the first thing is to get you over the psychological fear of being punched. The second thing is that you start to learn that most of the punches are ineffective, and there's ways to make them even more ineffective as a boxer. And then eventually you get in the ring and you're not concerned about being punched. You're thinking about what I'm going to do to the other person, how I'm going to win. And it's a transformation psychologically, right? And it sounds like your mom went through some of this, right? She was taking punches. She was taking punches from life, her career path and everything. And, the metaphor is really overdone, but, you get knocked down, you get back up. Well, the ring is kind of a perfect place for that metaphor. And not all entrepreneurs want to take the second punch. They get that first punch and they say, no mas. I'm not cut out for this. This isn't for me. I must be too stupid. I don't have all the right information, like you said. And they stop. But if they stay in there long enough, I don't think I've ever heard of a successful entrepreneur that did one exit that didn't feel comfortable doing another project.
No, I think you have to keep going. The other problem is that if you don't get up, it's a learned behavior. Yeah. People don't want to hear that, and it's probably not popular in today's times for whatever reason. I think we're sort of turning a corner now beyond where we were. But you have to get up. You have to get up for yourself. Because if you don't get up, you'll keep quitting. That is human predictable behavior. That's just. It's a fact. It's actually you can. It's a learned behavior. Everything we do becomes a learned behavior. So, I don't think I was thinking that. Having dyslexia and having to struggle certainly did help me, because what was I not going to read? That wasn't an option. So I think those struggles, I don't really hate to say it, but those struggles are what make you stronger. And no startup that I've ever done has ever been easy. None of them. They have not been easy. A lot of them got to a point where, many times I was like, oh, maybe I should quit. I wasn't quitting. And I also think for your listeners, Marty, you have to say, there are a time, and you know this, there are times in business when the business just doesn't work. Whether the market's not there, your product doesn't really solve a problem, it's more of a vitamin than it is an aspirin. There's 10 things that, a business just might not work. And what you need to be able to say at that point is, I'm either going to change directions, or I'm going to shut this down and go do another one. But you're not going to quit.
Right. I mean, and I'm right. I'm about 9 months into 3 startups, 2 commercial and 1 that's a nonprofit. So it's been a long time. It's been about 10 years since I've been in that mode, and it was interesting to go through the psychology of, starting from scratch, not having a lot of people, not having having thousands of people reporting to you as a CEO, and all of a sudden it's just you, and it's once I kind of got over that first flush of concern that maybe I got lazy, maybe I was too used to having apparatus and structure and people and all that, and maybe I shouldn't be doing this stuff anymore. I started to think, well, why not? What the hell, And what you said was really, really important. There's a lot of venture capital guys, and I know that's in your resume, private equity guys and all that. They will say if it isn't a good business, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, doesn't matter how many people you hire, doesn't matter swapping out talent. If it isn't a good business, you shouldn't be there. Sometimes the business is great, it's the wrong market. Sometimes the business in general is great, but you had a choice of 4 or 5 different kinds of products in that lane. You picked the wrong one. The pivot thing is interesting. I mean, I think that's why a lot of entrepreneurs try to build an enterprise platform of some sort that they can kind of do different things off of, and they can kind of peel and paste and cut things loose if they want to. I've seen some guys do that.
It's dangerous too, though, because I've tried that. It's hard to explain to a customer. Customers can't understand 3 things. They can understand one problem, one solution. It doesn't mean your product doesn't do other things, but you have to have one main pain point. I think the other part, Marty, is that people are I don't say too emotional. We're all emotional. Let's not make any mistake. When you start something on your kitchen table and you put all your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and then you got to say, hey, this isn't going to work. What some people are not willing to do is change. They're like, this has to work. This is the idea. This is the product. I built this, blah, blah, blah. And if you're going to hang on like that, you're hanging on too tight. I mean, and you need to make a decision. Are you trying to be right about what you were doing, or are you trying to build a business to make money? But you can't do both. And one probably leads to a bad outcome if you're not listening. So, for me, it was always, I'm not tied like you. I mean, I've been in so many different industries. I mean, I started a dog treat company, for God's sake, right now. I'm going from, I have a tech business, but I'm a tech guy building a CPG company. For me, it hasn't been about just like, oh, it's got to be this, like, oh, I got to do this and it's got to work. It's been, hey, can I figure this thing out? Can I build something in this market that a customer wants and that they enjoy and that they're happy about getting? And then can we make money doing it? And I think for me, that's what's really kept me going. Some people are like, oh, it's got to be in this market and it's got to be this. And if it's not that, then I'm out. Well, if you're going to be that rigid, a friend of mine said that the market's not emotional. The market doesn't care how you feel. The market deals you fundamentals and characteristics, and you either listen to those and adapt, or you probably get crushed, and the market doesn't care.
Right.
So I think you have to look at that way. But people can fall in love with their ideas, and we've all seen it. And we've all seen the stories where they all go broke.
Yeah, I call that what you just described. I call that business physics. And the reason I do that is because the law of physics is what it is. You can't change the laws of physics. You have to work with the laws of physics. You have to build something to fly, to roll, to heat up, to cool down. You have to take the laws of physics and try to figure out how to work within that construct. And business, as you said, with the market comment, it's not rational and it's not irrational because it's not a human being. It's not an emotional response. It's true stimulus response, and it's really that's why if you listen to people on stock market TV shows, if you listen to them and you actually look at the data that they're talking to, sometimes you're going like, well, that data doesn't look anything like what they're saying. What they're saying is they're trying to pump emotion into it so people get excited in a negative way, so they get worried. It's less about the greed factor, it's more about the fear factor. So they'll tune in or stay tuned in because, oh my God, it's like the weatherman now, And the weather does the same thing, gets everybody all fired up, and so people start losing faith in the weather or the weather forecasting because every tornado and 40 or 50 of the last, two hurricanes never came in. It's just overblown because emotion causes people to get excited and it motivates them. It motivates their behaviors. I think the other thing is, and I know some people that I like to build, right? A lot of people have become serial investors instead of serial entrepreneurs. They've decided the way to play is to put a little bit of stake money in 4 or 5 or 6 things that they would have wanted to build, but it's a way of having an arm's length relationship with the whole thing, and not have all the emotional commitment, all the things that you have, the sacrifices you have to make when you actually start to try to build something from scratch. Because it is a sacrifice. You're crowding things out of your mind. You might, depending on how good you are at controlling your lifestyle, you could be crowding out other things that are important because you have to become passionate, you have to become driven, and then you have to become, clinically logical and believe the reality that's confronting you. And you got to do all those things, and you got to do it in a continuous way. You can't just, otherwise it's a hobby, right?
And I guess I would say that you use the word sacrifice, and I'm not. I hesitate to use sacrifice because I don't know that you're sacrificing anything. But Marty, I have never met anybody who has done anything great. I don't mean just a little bit above average. I mean anybody who has achieved extraordinary results in some way, whether that's on the battlefield, whether that's in business, whether that's in sports, whatever, with having some level of quote unquote balance. There is no balance. Like Steph Curry for the Golden State Warriors, he doesn't have balance with his family. Like, make no mistake. You don't get to be the greatest shooter of all time by having balance. You just don't. And I think society has painted that as a bad thing. And I actually not sure who made that rule. Probably some mediocre person who believes in something that doesn't exist, but that just doesn't exist. Like, it will be so hard to be balanced because you know what'll happen? It's just game theory. Somebody will just outwork you in some way, some capacity, some way. So
some imbalanced person.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the wrong word. I think we use these words as unbalanced or sacrificial. What if it's not a sacrifice? Like, what if you like what you do? It doesn't mean you don't like your family or whatever other things you're not spending as much time with. But I think you have to be willing to do that. And if you are and I think a lot of people on social media with these quote unquote gurus get sold this bill of sale like, oh, well, hey, Marty, you can start an e-commerce business. You can ramp that thing up to $100 million and you'll be driving a Ferrari in 6 months. And, oh, by the way, you're only going to work 7 hours a day, maybe 6. If it was that easy, everybody'd be doing it, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, it's not that easy. It's super hard. And you're not going to have balance. And I think what happens is a lot of people get into the game, just going back to where we started here with, startups and those things. And for me, I was willing and have been willing to do that. It's not occasionally that I'm like, oh man, like I probably missed a few things. Like I did. I definitely missed a few things here and there, but also have some results because of that, I'm not saying they make up for, but they certainly made life a little bit easier. And I know nobody on their deathbed says, oh, I wish I made more money. I get that. But at some level, like, let's not fool ourselves into thinking that some level of financial stability doesn't, back to what you said earlier if you believe the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're at the bottom and you're scraping just for food and shelter and those things, you're in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And that does not allow you headspace to see other things that could be right in front of you. Now, some people have the discipline to be able to do that, and or they get help. But I think I don't know what that really ends up at. But I think my intent in that rant is that you're not going to be balanced if you want to do anything great. It just doesn't work.
Well, I agree with you on that. I'm I'm a poster child for not having balance. The book I'm almost done writing, I got 4 chapters to go. I just started talking about the character of a seal and what people think seals do with it's a relentless intensity, a pursuit that it doesn't consume them in a crazy way. It consumes them in a focus. I mean, it's whatever I have to be able to learn, whatever I have to be proficient at, whatever it is that I have to do, accomplish, learn, etc., to get this thing that I'm looking at. And it could be a mission, it could be a particular level of proficiency within an elite team. It's and your athlete, using Seth Curry is perfect because books on flow state. What do they focus on? The elite, cutting edge, tip of the spear athletes, giant wave surfers, free climbers.
Michael Phelps. Look at Michael Phelps. He'll tell you straight up every day. He swam all day. He probably missed a lot. He's also the most decorated Olympian ever to swim, and not even swim ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I also don't believe in compromise the way most people think of compromise, is that everybody gets together in negotiation. I had the pleasure of meeting Chris Voss, and he's got a book, Don't Split the Difference. But that's how people think. That's how they've been brought up to get along together is, you want this, somebody else wants that, let's meet in the middle, let's carve it up 50-50 so you got 2 unhappy people. And Steve Jobs and other people that had moved the world said, this is what I want. And if the engineer said it can't be done, he got new engineers. Elon Musk did the same thing. He didn't compromise with them and say, okay, make an iPhone the size of a Reader's Digest instead of a wallet or something. They didn't do that. They didn't compromise with it. They said, this is it. This is the focus. This is the end state. Use your brains and make this happen. Make this do this thing. And that seems mean, and that seems non-academic because you're not asking everybody's opinions and you're not floating it to committees and groups and think tanks and all that. But in business it's like that, and in warfare, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Frederick the Great, Charles the 12th. You could start picking guys out of history, most of them younger than 32, who just said, thanks for all the advice, guys. This is what we're going to do. And then they just crushed everything. So, and a little bit of that is you don't know what you don't know.
Well, yeah, for sure. I think when it happens to people is they get disappointed that it's not like that. So, and there's not a lot of people. Look, it's not really, you characterize me as a laid back person, and I think most people see that, but they see me as highly intense at the same time sometimes. And I'm willing to tell, just like that book I wrote, I'm willing to boil it down.
Yeah.
To your point, I didn't leave anything out. I just made it raw, unfiltered, and simple. And
Yeah.
that's not romantic.
No, it's not. But is
But
it all
sometimes-
is it all the liberal arts majors? Is that what we're up against?
Well, I was a liberal. I went to a liberal arts college, so I don't know. I sort of got. My mom always said when I told her when we moved to California, in that conversation, I said something to her. I was like, "Man, California is just so much like people out here are just swing for the fence, and not just swing for the fence, but like if you have an idea, go after it, and if it doesn't work, who cares? Like out here, that is it. And growing up in Maryland, I always joked that it's one of the original 13 colonies, and the East Coast is so traditional in that way that it's gotten better, obviously, but it does not embrace pursuit and failure the way the West Coast, Northern California does. It just doesn't. And she said, "Well, Brandon, the good news is that you got both," and I think that has been part of my advantage, because things can get out of whack if you don't have a moral compass sometimes when you're dealing with that sort of intensity and that sort of money that you're going after or trying to earn. So,
Right.
But I think people get scared, and I think that's when they wave off. And then, unfortunately, for a lot of people, I think they miss their potential because they're scared, and they don't realize that the rest of us, like me and you, are also scared too. It's just that we kept going.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of our time. Is there anything else you want to bring up? Any new projects, or how can people reach you? And
Yeah, I think the best way is just I keep my website up to date. It's just brandoncwhite.com. I've got a few podcasts, and our dog treat company will be up there soon. So if you own a dog, we'd love you to try our BFF dog treats. That's
great. Well, thank you. I mean, love to have you on again, Brandon. It's always fun to talk to you. We talk, by the way, we talk like this over the phone sometimes, just to talk like this.
We do. I don't think you and I talk for hours.
Yeah.
And I always come out with very thoughts that take time to unpack. I know there's sometimes a few months where we don't go talking together. I never though really feel like, Marty, that there's a gap, because I'm still processing all the things that you and I talked about.
Yeah, and same here. All right. Well, thanks. And for all of you that are watching Instincts, if you have any ideas or any other topics or guests that you'd like to see, just let us know at podfinitynation@gmail.com. And like us and share us. We appreciate that.